Hello, friends, and welcome to Worldbuild with Us, the podcast where we create fantastical worlds with help from you, our listeners. My name is Rob Hilferty, and I'm here with my co-hosts Daniel Quinn and Courtney Staples. On today's episode, we have a world-building prompt from Philip Rosiak, and he says, "Hey guys, recently I've been looking into some of Da Vinci's machine drawings, and they're truly fascinating considering that what seems like modern technology could have been thought of by someone in the Renaissance. This inspired me to think of a world similar to Renaissance Italy, with warring city-states, rich bankers, merchants, and artistic vibrance. But to add a twist to it, in this Renaissance society, somebody like Da Vinci comes up with similar machines, but they actually work. Now there's inventors trying to one-up each other, for better or for worse, and I wanted to see what all of you can come up with for this prompt and setting. Hope you all have a great day. Smiley face. Thank you so much, and a big old smiley face right back at you. I am very excited to get into this, but before we do, remember that if you want us to build your world, like we're doing with Phillips today, you can always go to our website, worldbuildwithus.com, and click on the Submit Prompt link, follow the instructions, and we will build your world within a reasonable amount of time. Plus, if you want to follow us on social media, you can always go to Twitter and follow us at Let's World Build. You can go to our Discord if you want to become part of our Discord community. And if you're feeling particularly generous, you can always give us money over on Patreon, with a link for those in the description of this very show. Now, enough of the shilling. Let's keep on moving. Who wants to get us started off with this Da Vinci Renaissance-esque setting we've got going on today?
I can kick us off.
Courtney, go right ahead. What do you got for us?
We're not going to make this a historical fantasy in Renaissance Italy, unless that's one of your tenets, which is always a possibility. But I thought it could be helpful to do a really brief kind of context of why the Italian Renaissance happened, to kind of ground everyone in the major concepts.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't have Medici's on my tenant list, but yeah, let's go for it.
All right. So to give some background there, the Renaissance started around 1400-ish in Italy. And there were a lot of different factors at play that separated it from the medieval era, which had been pretty rigid, to put it one way, between feudalism and strict religion. People from different cultures and regions were interacting more, trading more, especially after the Crusades, which lasted from about 1100 to 1300 or so. Then the Black Death showed up in the mid-1300s and killed an absolutely enormous amount of people across Europe, West Central Asia, North Africa. And when I say enormous, I mean like 75 to 200 million people total. In Europe, somewhere between 30 to 60% of the population at the time, which is just insane to think about. And not surprisingly, that caused some people to question, what the fuck was going on and why was it happening, and in turn question the Catholic Church, which had essentially been like the reigning power over Europe for centuries at that point. And that kind of helped set the stage for secular groups and families to gain influence. But on a brighter note, there was also a renewed interest in Greek and Roman art, myth, philosophy, which led to humanism and the idea that broad liberal education for like the common people was actually a good thing, oddly enough. And of course, a more educated populace is more likely to, again, question and challenge tradition. And that was really boosted in the mid-1400s when Gutenberg invented the printing press, which allowed for much, much faster and cheaper printing of text, and thus much faster and cheaper spreading of ideas to all of these commoners who could now read. So that was kind of this perfect storm of like war, tragedy, curiosity, innovation, that made people question the old ways and push for something new. And I think it'll be important to keep that in mind while we build a setting, that kind of blend of people coming together, not just sharing their own cultures, but also taking interest in exploring the past and like pulling from that.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, overview on what Renaissance means, because I think a lot of time when people who are interested in fantasy, when they think medieval, a lot of the times they're actually thinking of, just the general past, or they're actually blending medieval with Renaissance stuff.
Yeah.
There's this idea that no one ever pictures history correctly. And there are thousands of terrible listicles from BuzzFeed et al. About, like 17 brain busters about how you're thinking about history wrong.
It's high
Like
quality
there's
journalism. Yeah.
yeah, and like they're right, like
Mm.
they're absolutely correct. But there is a thing. I think this is mostly in fantasy where it's like they tend to eschew a lot of, or rather, this happens a lot in fantasy where it basically becomes like this is just the past, and it's like a
Mm.
melange of all these different eras within human history and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is one thing that I did also want to mention about the impact on the plague as well, because
Mm.
one of the really important things that happened is after the plague, because there was such a shortage of workers, there was actually a greater bargaining effect that the
Mm.
laborers were able to kind of hold over the aristocracy. So they started to get better wages and better treatment and stuff like that. So that's something that I also want to harp on and kind of make sure
Mm.
that that doesn't get glossed over as well.
Yeah, that's very important too. Definitely.
Absolutely.
That was a very helpful intro, Courtney.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So now we can ignore all of that and go on
Yeah.
with our tenets. So, Courtney, what is your first tenet that you want to introduce here to our Renaissance world?
So given that Philip wanted a somewhat like competitive one-upping vibe to the setting, with inventors kind of competing and inventing these crazy things, I would love to include a major university or maybe a series of smaller universities or guilds so that we could go in an almost like Harry Potter-esque direction with the overall feel.
I'm so okay with this. You have no idea. Like this makes me very happy that we can do like
Excellent.
kind of a bardic college or something like that, or kind of
Yeah.
like a magic school or magic college. Like I'm totally okay with that.
Awesome.
That's neat. That would I like the competitive intellectuals more so than competitive businesses in that case.
Yeah. And that is actually something that I would like to dovetail into because I think that it's appropriate. My first tenet is related to magic in general. And when I first read the prompt, I actually missed inventors. So I'm going to broaden the spectrum of magic just a little bit so we're not going to just be applying it to inventors, but my first tenet is people in this setting manifest magic through the arts. So that's going to be painting, drawing, sculpting, music, etc. And how powerful the effect is based on how much they love the thing that they're doing and how much creativity they're approaching the subject with. So when you say it's not just competition between businesses, I want to codify that even further, Daniel, and say this is demonstrably not about business. This is very much about the arts themselves.
I love that concept.
I was going to say, like, does the magic govern how technology is being developed as well? Or is it kind of like the kickoff inspiration point for these ventures to create technology?
So I married the two ideas that, like when you consider Da Vinci, like he's a famous artist, inventor. He was a Renaissance man in many ways, but and the thing that I wanted to focus on was like the reason that Da Vinci and the reason that magic manifests is because like he was so inspired and so brilliant and so creative that this magic essentially manifests in whatever he's doing. So I have another tenet that is related to that. I'm actually going to skirt around it for now because I want to hear what other people have to say. But my basic concept that I'm working with here is that whatever the person makes, that's where the magic is. So you can sculpt something and then that magic is manifest through the sculpture or through the painting or through the poem itself,
Cool. So then I guess we should wait till later to figure out how magic functions in the world, because then there are questions of what does like the rise of reason and rationality mean, in this period, given that it's supposed to be a departure from our previous, irrational period.
Yeah, my both of my tenets are very much related to magic and the arts. So I'm hoping that other people have other ideas, but I also have a bunch of other ideas that I can work with too. That's what the show is about, is getting excited and about being creative. So Daniel, why don't you tell us what your first tenet is and kind of give us a little bit more guidance here?
I was interested in the Da Vinci figure himself or herself or whoever this person may or may not be. I know there are multiple inventors, but obviously there's probably some legendary one. So my tenet was this particular inventor is himself a machine, though he doesn't realize it, and it's a mystery who created him, and that his inventions depend in part on the technology with which he was created.
Interesting.
So he's an automaton, basically, or something like that.
What if he's like from one of the older civilizations that people started to look back to, but he just doesn't realize it because he's essentially turned on more recently? So he kind of woke up with all these ideas and started inventing crazy things, and it turns out that
I like that,
carrying the knowledge back from the past.
I do like the idea that this is a lost civilization or even a forgotten civilization.
I've been Atlantean in some way.
Yeah, actually, like something that is so far in the past to the current civilization that they've basically been forgotten about, but there are obvious markers that they existed in the world. Yeah. And I like the idea that we can think of them as Atlanteans, where they're hyper advanced compared to, the civilizations of the time, but they're just fucking gone,
Maybe that, like, we can go with the old adage that, their technology is so advanced that it's magical.
Maybe we'll have to talk about that when I get to my second tenet, though.
With Atlanteans being mentioned now, I'm picturing this robot just like washing up on shore one day and getting out and washing himself off and being like, I have some ideas.
Oh, that's awesome.
He gets right to work. He's what's his face? Tom, what's the guy that I love?
Tom
Bombadil.
Tim
no,
Rogers.
God, no. What's his name? The one with the
Tim Rogers.
Tim Rogers.
He's Tim Rogers, but Da Vinci form.
Okay. For some reason, Courtney, when you say that, like, I'm also now just picturing him like literally walking out of the sea, being like, I have things to make and things to do.
The first thing he builds right out of the ocean.
Yeah.
And I could see him going to like some poor farmer's like hamlet or something, and then like pushing aside all the stuff on their desk, and he just like says, I need to get to work. I need the following tools,
Yeah, and that farmer's like, what is going on? Like, oh, I mean, thank you for automating my harvest this year. Now I'm going to go learn something, I guess.
Yeah.
So I'll read a book.
Yeah.
My God, he must have started the first of those many lyceums, that are out there.
Oh, can we make it so he's wait. Okay, this is gonna sound a little ridiculous. Can he be, or can it be, a living printing press? And it's the first one in the world to them. Yeah. So he's literally like rolling off like reams of papers and books and stuff like that.
Maybe he's printing out bits of knowledge that they can start using and learning to generate their own magic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of, yeah. All right, so Courtney, what's your second tenet? I love the direction that we're going with already. I'm very excited.
Yeah, so my second one was that hot air balloons and zeppelins were among the first major inventions, and that helped kick off a new age of exploration. So maybe our robot Da Vinci used like some sort of hot air technology to come up from the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah, like he like rising from the depths on like a hot air balloon. Yeah, that's.
I mean, maybe this Atlantis was actually in the sky, and he descended not from the. He didn't ascend from the ocean, but he descended from the sky in a hot air balloon.
Oh, that's cool.
And now we have like floating continent stuff. That's fun, and like that's not even something that's going to be touched upon for another couple hundred years. It'll be like it'll be like this mythical El Dorado type thing where it's like people will go on expeditions to try and find it, and they will almost always fail.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah. Okay. This is already coming together. I'm loving this.
Like Mary Poppins by Da Vinci.
Is he a singing robot too?
I was going to say, how good is the singing of this robot?
He obviously sings. He sings opera at random.
Oh,
Obviously.
okay. Hold on. So I'm still thinking that he's a printing press, right? Like this thing is coming out of its chest, but to kind of square it with the concept that I was running with, where it's all related to art, he sings the schemata of these things, and that's what happens.
He's
So,
wondering,
like,
whenever he's working, he's singing.
yeah, and that's how these things get printed. It's because he's such a great and passionate singer that these inventions, like the schemata for these inventions, the blueprints for these inventions, just kind of roll out of him. That's great. That's really fun. Daniel, what is your second tenet?
My second tenet deals with the, I guess, geological landscape, because he mentioned there being city-states that are always competing with each other. So I wanted to say that there was some natural disaster or perhaps man-made cataclysm, I don't care which, that makes the city-states physically separated from each other in such a way that it's difficult. It's either dangerous to travel between them or requires a specific type of transportation in order to get between them easily.
Okay. I suppose we'll have to suss that out and figure out what that is. Maybe we can put a pin in it.
I mean, the balloons are already a good idea. Clue towards it, so.
There's also something that I'm thinking of where, like, maybe that's why the inventors and the artists in this world matter as much as they do, is because the people themselves can't really muster large armies to try and conquer.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah,
because it would be difficult to move large amounts of people.
Yeah. I mean, like, there's no, like, maybe the flying devices are very limited in scope and range. They're small, right? And I mean, like, you're not going to have a helicopter. You might have like an ornithopter or something like that.
I'm picturing, like, instead of necessarily oceans separating these things, it's more like these city-states are built up on different cliffs. And they're very vertically oriented. They need like elevator type technology to pull people up and down. And
so the land was shattered in some way.
Yeah, like there are deep canyons running between different areas.
What also might be really cool is that, like, this idea that there are great updrafts and winds that kind of support, or even on bad days, maybe even hinder those types of flying and gliding and such. But there's also this cool verticality of, like, hey, I'm gonna grab my ornithopter, grab my wind glider, and like kind of move from like district to district or something like that.
And the cities can like be built across tiers of these huge cliffs too, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. I mean, obviously it's going to be kind of dangerous, although not necessarily. I can imagine that there's probably like literal safety nets built so people don't die or like die due to
terraces.
Exactly.
And I think that also explains, as well as the cataclysmic features of the landscape, that the reason why cities are so populated, because it doesn't make sense to like spread out, because you really can't.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And it could be too that the canyons below, like, since the sunlight doesn't reach them as much, maybe they're just more dangerous, more barren.
Harder to grow food.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So these are really coming together. I'm also loving the idea of like vertical cities, and to go along with one of my favorite concepts as well is the vertical forest. So it is, essentially like a park that is growing through a, city, like a city building or something like that. That's always one of my favorite things in modern architecture anyway. So I think that we can, I have my second tenet that I also want to toss out there as well. And that is, so I've previously established that magic is basically done through the arts, right? What I wanted to follow up with that is each piece of art is an entirely unique effect through magic. So there's this thing where it's like each piece that you make is always going to have a different effect. And what's important about that is that you don't necessarily want to make the same thing over and over again, lest you be called like derivative. And that got me thinking to this idea that reputation among artists is paramount. Like your reputation matters so much more. Like if you're called, derivative, if you're called uncreative, that is like cause for a duel. Let's put it that way.
I love that.
Yeah,
It's almost like they make magic items.
Yeah, that's exactly what they do. Yeah, that's what I had in mind. And I thought that I had this in my tenet, but I didn't. I thought Daniel would have fun with this one, but the concept that I was working with magic was, there's a rebellious spirit within these artists and within these creative types. They infuse a little bit of that into the work itself, and so it's there's rebellious spirit within the art, and then that art in turn is affected by it because it then stops obeying the laws of physics. Yeah, I thought I was going to say, I'm like, I knew Daniel would have fun with that one.
That's neat. So like it's like so let's say you have a clock or something, maybe it's such a great clock that it actually ends up giving you a little bit more time than is physically possible. Like it does something magical, essentially, each of these items.
Not only that, but it also helps explain how Da Vinci's, because you look at Da Vinci's artwork, his inventions, the stuff like the corkscrew helicopter or like the ornithopter, and you look at those and like those can literally not work. And then you're like, well, why not? Because physics. And so I'm like, well, fuck it. Like, let's say that like for whatever reason, there's a rebellious spirit, and that spirit manifests as I don't obey the laws. And by laws, I mean the laws of physics.
Could we turn that slightly to make it in line with the Renaissance and the rational mind? Like instead of it not obeying the laws of physics, could it be that it changes the laws of physics to make these things possible?
I mean, I see that as essentially the same thing,
well, because it would be in the spirit of the Renaissance in that they're discovering new laws of the universe, right? But what if these devices, that the rebellious magic of these people, it pushes the boundaries of what is possible. So it really expands the laws. So now like an ornithopter is possible because there's a thing called orthogonal gravity that this thing has essentially invented that functions for this particular device.
I like that concept, but then would that mean inherently that each time a magic item is made, there is a new law of physics that gets written as a result?
I think like it changes the rules a little bit. Like I don't want to violate the idea of like each item being unique. So like I don't think another item can do that thing in particular, but the way that it functions is that it's altered the rules slightly.
Gotcha. And there is a way to cheat the unique effect thing, by the way, that I'm considering, where you can have similar effects, but this is again what I was saying earlier, where it's like you don't want to be called derivative. So you can have a thing that shoots fireballs, but everyone having a thing that shoots fireballs, like that's gauche. And that's
maybe it's the most precise. Maybe the first one that's made is like the most calibrated and the best one because it came with the rules, and all the other ones are knockoffs, so they're like shittier fireballs.
That actually kind of works because again, it's what I was saying before, where it's how much creativity and love that you have for the thing. So the first one, because it's new and innovative, is going to be the best kind of that thing. And then all of the other ones, the more derivative you are, the less powerful the item is. And so that's why like weak artists are the less creative ones who basically steal from others.
I'm also picturing the orcs from 40K. Don't they like paint their vehicles red or something to make them go
because
faster,
they believe that they have an effect they do.
So like I'm picturing like a similar kind of thing here where you like kind of will something to happen and it like doesn't really make any sense, but for some reason it works. Yeah.
That's honestly like I did have that in the back of my mind. I'm like, this kind of reminds me of the 40K orcs, but I think it works because it's in a completely different context,
Yeah, I think what's great about this too is there's a way for us to square it with the theme, right? Like, as I was afraid that we might end up really just extending the period that came before, which I assume, if this is a Renaissance setting, a Dark Ages, where unreason and religion reigned. But here it's more like it's the divine inspiration of creativity, the muse, that has inspired us to really push the boundaries of what we know.
Absolutely. So the Da Vinci figure, can we call him the Muse?
Oh, maybe.
Oh yeah.
Although I don't know. I feel like for some reason I think of a muse as like they're in Greek mythology. They're goddesses essentially.
Yeah,
Yeah,
divine
well, I
beings.
mean,
Yeah.
we can call the robot machine the Muse. Like that's fine. I don't mind changing.
Could we call him the
gender or anything.
genius? Because that makes more.
That sounds
sense.
that's kind of arrogant, but I'm
Well, I
fine
don't mean
with
in
that.
I mean in the traditional sense of genius, like a spirit,
Gotcha.
Mhm.
of genius,
Um,
not like really smart.
I'm having different ideas now, but
Mm-hmm.
yes, yeah. Let's stick with that for now.
It's a shorthand for
I think
now.
that'd be kind of fun. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So let's consider other things within the setting that I'm kind of interested in. Where do we want our focal point to be? Like I obviously have a bias. Like I want it to be pretty heavily focused on art, and what I think is rather interesting is that art is essentially the stem for magic and everything like that, but there's something to Renaissance art where it's like you needed a patron to fund this, otherwise it just
Mhm.
wouldn't happen. Like you basically die destitute. So how can we mimic that in this type of world? Or do
I
we
mean,
want to?
I feel like it's possible if we just have powerful families in the city states who kind of pick out and commission their favorite artists to
Mm-hmm.
invent things for them. So you sort of have like a artist or inventor on retainer at all times.
Yeah,
Or a
because
team.
these people, they're not like. There's probably a lot of them, and they're trained like in these universities we've established, but.
Mhm.
I imagine they're not nearly as numbered as like a common folk or like the wealthy families or the merchants who
Right,
need them.
yeah.
So how much of an emphasis do we want to have on these schools, these like art schools? Like that's the thing that I'm kind of interested in. Because to me, we could absolutely make that the entirety of the setting where we're just focusing on these wizarding schools a la Harry Potter,
Mhm.
I'm not super interested in the setting being all about the schools, only because like Harry Potter just seems a tread thing. I do think it would be it's an important part of the setting because that's where these geniuses get trained. I
Mhm.
imagine they may have some raw talent, but it has to be honed. So I could
Mm,
imagine that being like one of the main settings, but I could also imagine like, visiting your patron is a setting element.
mm,
Going to the merchant place is a setting element because you've got to find a way to,
Mhm.
sell your devices or whatever. Because I imagine too, like if I create a unique device, maybe there are other applications that aren't magical that come out of it now that I know about these rules that I can then mass produce. That's so let's say the example I gave with like you made a magical ornithopter that has a new way of traveling through wind. Maybe knowing about that rule lets you create, I don't know, a dishwasher that utilizes that rule somehow, and that's what the merchants mass produce. But the magic
Mhm.
item is still magic and unique.
interesting. So that's like kind of
Mhm.
a side effect, like, oh, we discovered this new rule of
Mm-hmm.
physics. That's kind of interesting.
Or
I
like
think
take your
that
fireball example. Like if you can now propel these fire things from whatever device you created, you might be able to create like I don't know a heater with that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really interesting things that I'm considering here. I think that there's one thing that I have in my mind that I would actually like to kind of get away from, which is the sole source of magic is the artists themselves. And I kind of want to stick to that. But I'm also now thinking that there's like a separate substrata or a separate cast of people who are inventors who take what the artists do and try and reproduce it and mass produce it in some way. Kind of like
Yeah,
what Daniel's suggesting. Yeah.
I think
Mhm.
so. Because you need like regular engineers, and there's probably people who
Right.
aren't inspired, who want to learn.
Right, exactly.
Mhm.
And I think that's kind of a fun way that you can make it so it's not all about art. There's this kind of like, and not only that, but these are two classes that certainly see a rise within the Renaissance themselves, which are the artists, obviously, and you see like engineers, inventors, and people within that oeuvre also gain a lot of importance as well. You see a lot of modern wonders, get constructed during the Renaissance period. I think there's a way that we can marry those ideas where you can basically be a bard, which is the artist, or like the wizard equivalent, or like actually not wizard, but an artificer, where they create and construct these inventions based on what the artists do. Yeah, I think we can totally square that.
Yeah, it's almost like an artist's guild or workshop where you have sort of like the head inventor and then these other people a bit below who kind of take his stuff and reproduce it on a more mass scale.
Right, but I'm considering like these are two like because the way that my magic works, it's based on creativity and passion, but this is not that. This is something else entirely. This is almost like a science to it, or like an engineering to it, where that.
I don't think they're opposed. Like what she's saying
No,
is
no.
Yeah, like what she's saying is you have like you might have hired one of these artists to be a lead designer essentially, and his genius and passion creates some magic item that's unique, but then the engineers underneath him look at the new law that comes out of that and they say, well, what can we make with this? And they all maybe work for a merchant in that particular case.
Right, but I do want to make them separate in that regard, where it's like you can have the art. Basically, what I'm trying to get at is that this would make our Da Vinci figure more interesting, because in this case, they would blend the two like other people haven't been able to do before that,
I gotcha, yeah. Which was basically what Da Vinci did. Like he was obviously an amazing artist, but also a scientist, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing that I also think would be really fun to try and focus on as well, is that the ultimate pursuit of these things would be a combination of everything into one, again, Renaissance man, where you're gathering bits of everything together.
I love that how we have kind of this magical spark that leads to a whole like realm of discovery that can be based on non-magical things. I think that's a really cool blend, and it really it expresses the idea of a Renaissance, which is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly, and I do want to try and stick to those thematics as much as possible. There's one other thing that I really do want to harp on, because one of my favorite things about the Medicis in general in that period of history is the idea of the vendetta, where you can have this raging blood feud with another family, and I want that to be a bigger part of the setting than we've currently talked about, which is not at all. But I do
stolen ideas can definitely drive that.
Oh, yeah.
That's absolutely part of it, and I think that's where we can start to get into the different city states that are separated, that maybe they gather and hold on.
Ooh, at a convention, like at a big fair.
Like a World's Fair.
Oh, it's a World's Fair. Yeah, absolutely.
To demo all the magic items they've made, and that's where like a lot of subterfuge happens.
It's not only that, but like I would imagine that it is, partially a way to show off what you've created, but in reality, it's kind of like where a lot of the backdoor, like mercantile and like a lot of the trade deals happen.
The subterfuge.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
And probably some art heists too, which would be a fun.
Well, you gotta have an art heist. Yeah. I mean, come on.
Could you imagine the art heist? Like for some of the really large objects, it would be hilarious and amazing.
Yeah. Like that time they stole the Eiffel Tower. Absolutely. Yeah. That didn't actually, that's not a historical event, by the way. I want to make sure.
But that would be amazing though.
Yeah. Not only that, but can you imagine like an artist or an engineer who's like, oh man, I've figured out a way to animate stone or animate this, but I don't really have a use for it. And then they're like, guys, this giant Colossus statue over here, we're going to animate it so it's going to steal itself. Like that's how that's going to work. Yeah.
Or like, who stole it? Like, it's a difficult question to answer.
We don't actually know. It's just kind of gone.
Stole itself.
And it might not be like a Colossus, but I can instead get in a Ghostbusters 2 reference where they steer the Statue of Liberty with a bunch of pink slime. So that's also a possibility as well. Daniel did not like that reference. Okay, I don't know what happened, but yeah.
Like what? I like Ghostbusters.
Yeah, but Ghostbusters 2.
I like Ghostbusters 2.
All right.
Is that the one
Well,
with the painting guy?
yeah.
Yeah, that one's great.
Yeah.
That it is good. I wish that they made better Ghostbusters movies.
Yeah, it's true. There's a new one coming out. I don't know if that's gonna be any good.
That's what I mean by
Oh, really?
better. I'm just
Yeah.
assuming it's going to be garbage, but
Me
it could be.
Yeah.
We're cutting all that, aren't we?
You had a question about like what other places you want to focus on. Like there's one thing that makes me interested now because we described it more is this land below.
Yeah.
And I would wonder how it functions in opposition to the mythical Lantean land in the sky. And I kind of see expeditions attempting to go in both directions.
Yeah, like there obviously you want to find out why the Earth is hollow. Like that's certainly part of it. So you have the expedition into below the Earth's crust. Actually, you know what? I just realized we can square the apocalyptic, like Black Plague level event by just having the cataclysm be that event. The reason that we lost a third to 60% of the population is the Earth cracking and opening and like swallowing up large swaths of population.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And then we can even have parallels where it's like, and that's where laborers started to kind of, like gain more hold and stuff like that. Yeah, we can see a lot of those parallels happen in a similar event. Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, what if something similar had happened in ancient times, and that's why there are those like cloud continents way above the Earth?
Like in their way of. Sorry, go ahead. Finish it up.
Yeah, previously, like they were kind of the surface of the Earth, and then something happened to just drop everything else down, and then it just happened again with this cataclysm.
Oh, I see. I had a similar but different idea, which was their solution to this was, well, if the Earth's going to keep doing that, we're just going to fly above it. Like that's what happens to them.
I could also see this being the result of their celestial spheres not quite being like ours. Like perhaps there are shells, and the one above, collapsed into the one that they're now on top of, and there's shells beyond the Atlantean one. But that could go into the mysteries of the cosmos.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there. Yeah, man. Yeah, this setting is already pretty damn fun. I'm kind of excited here. Let's go ahead and figure out our world anchor, and then we can build that and then figure out what we want to do with it. So let's roll some dice and figure out what the theme of this thing is going to be. The theme of this world building anchor is going to be survival. And the thing that we're going to be focusing on is a relic. Well, that's fairly simple. So we've got a relic focused on survival.
Can it be part of an expedition in either direction? That's the survival part?
Sure. I mean, is this something that allows expeditions to happen? It allows survival of these city-states as we see them?
I was thinking it's maybe the survival aspect has to be part of an expedition to get to a relic.
Like echoing that El Dorado search kind of thing from
before.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, we could say that something is invented that enables that, and so the expedition begins in the workshop, and then it's to acquire something.
When we build the anchor, I always assume that the anchor itself is something that is vital to the functioning of the world.
Oh, okay.
I got you.
Yeah. So like,
so then if we start in the workshop, maybe they develop something to do an expedition.
Right. Okay.
Or do you mean anchor as in like it's essential to the Earth as it is currently?
Maybe. That's certainly part of it. Like that's something that I have in mind. Yeah. Like the inherent survival of these city-states is due to this relic, or as Daniel is suggesting, maybe the ability to even do these expeditions that are required to even maneuver around the world as it is because of this relic.
Well, let's focus on Courtney's helium balloons and expand them. Like perhaps that's a really momentous event because when the first one was built, it enabled them to travel safely, up, down, vertically. So like we could take it to the Dune level of complexity where it's like there are a lot of rules about how you can travel and what sort of devices there are to do that.
Yeah, I like that a lot, actually. I like that concept. We can have it again, do we want it to be the first or the biggest or the most important of these zeppelins? Do we have like a do we have like a Hindenburg situation? Like what's the deal that we're kind of thinking of here?
I wouldn't say the first because I imagine that they have had them for some time in order to like establish a lot of the setting, but maybe a really important one that lets them go further, like a big one, or I don't know. What do you think, Courtney? They're your babies.
Yeah, I'm thinking almost like an Amelia Earhart kind of situation, like something that enables very, very far off travel. Potentially so far off that the adventurers get lost and aren't heard from again.
Ooh.
Interesting.
Though I feel like
so maybe there was
lately.
What was that,
sorry,
Courtney?
can you say that again?
Well, I feel like we've done that in a bunch of settings lately. As far as like sending somebody off to explore and then
maybe there's
fucking off. Yeah.
I think I have. So maybe the first one was the unique device that was created, right? That to do this long distance travel. It was the one that was inspired, like the magical item. And they started to develop other ones for it. But that first one was sent off on an initial mission and never returned. So now they've engineered a line of these to travel, right? They're whatever kind of device they are, and they're searching for that first one with
it's
the
the
Amelia
blueprint
character.
Yeah. It's the blueprint for all the others. That totally makes sense.
Exactly.
And then we could even take that El Dorado myth a bit further and marry the two. So it's, well, this is the one that can go the furthest. I think our salvation lies among the clouds with that El Dorado city. I'm going to take this and try and find it. And then it never comes back.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay. That's pretty cool. I like that a lot, actually. I feel like there's some conflicts here that we can see that we're just not. I don't know. I'd like to see a more focal point in terms of conflicts and whatnot. What do you guys think?
I think that may come from the factions as we develop it further.
Well, do we want to talk about world governance then? Because we made sure that the city states are all unique and they're all very important and they're all very focused on reputation. They have the World's Fair thing. Do we have any other concepts or questions that we have surrounding them?
Oh, actually, speaking of the World's Fair, maybe that takes place on an enormous, like, Zeppelin type thing, like floating.
Yeah, you need like neutral ground or something like
exactly.
that. Yeah.
Giant Zeppelin.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically a flying city for a little bit. Yeah, that's totally cool. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we can make that. That's a great idea. Do we have any other questions, comments, or anything else like that we have about the world?
One question I had, and I don't think we need this, but it's something to consider because it parallels the Renaissance. You talked about the church losing power, and being a significantly powerful entity historically. So like, is there such a parallel here? And we know there's city states; they have their own kind of control and governance. But is there a conglomerate, something larger, than that?
It's the church of the open field and the mountain, the things that basically betrayed them to cause this cataclysm to happen.
I like that too.
Yeah. But here's the thing. I do want to point out that even though the church lost a lot of power as a result of the Black Death, the church is still immensely powerful.
Oh yeah.
Right. That's what I mean. Like if it's still there, we should probably, but then again, is that a faction question? Is that something that we can expand there? I don't know.
I think we can talk about it here and now. I mean, I think making a faction now is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, is the church as it is now, is it a faction? Is it a city state? Like, what do you guys think the remnants of the church should be?
Like a Vatican type situation?
That's what I'm thinking, like the Vatican itself.
Can it have fallen into the earth and there are remnants of the church, like cults, not cults, but groups that have been in all city states, but the Vatican itself is plummeted into the darkness?
Ooh.
Can we maybe take that idea and have it so it's like teetering on an edge or teetering on a precipice or something like that?
Like the
and
Citadel
maybe,
fell in, but it's teetering.
and
Yes.
maybe that religious group is so intent on like commissioning artists for inventions because they want to save that last existing part of their church with like hot air balloons or some sort of like anti-gravity technology.
Yeah, that totally works. See, that's a really cool idea because now you have like the church city state that is basically in this dark crevasse, right?
and the church agents who might be trying to steal art to save themselves.
Yeah. And I'm also thinking like, what does that city look like? Is it dark all the time except for like maybe at like high noon? You know, like does that mean that the church is going around with a bunch of like gas lights or something like that?
When it's prayer time is the 1 hour when the sun shines on the crack where it sits.
Yes.
That's absolutely correct, Daniel. That's absolutely correct. It's like 1 hour the next hour that you go to church. Yeah.
With the maw, remember that?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's
totally picturing that.
Yeah, I can see that. All right. Any other questions? Because I'm feeling pretty satisfied. I'm feeling pretty hyped about this concept in this setting now.
It's cool.
Yeah. Courtney, any questions?
I don't think so. Actually, one thing that I wanted to point out is how important like the materials and media would be for the artists. So I feel like that could also explain some of the expeditions going down. Is for like mining out minerals that they can grind into pigments and
not just that, but it would also explain the need for patrons because these materials are insanely expensive because of how hard they are to come by.
Makes sense.
And not only that, but what you were saying earlier, Courtney, is that like maybe the laborer is not necessarily the agrarian farmer, but the adventurers and explorers who are risking their lives on these expeditions to get pigments and whatnot.
I like that idea a lot. And that opens a lot of doors for like RPG type situations where you're part of one of those groups going down into this kind of dark area that you've never been to before.
Oh yeah.
Adds a lot of mystery to the setting.
This is like automatically ready for RPGs, this fucking setting.
Well,
I'm already picturing rendering a scenario for it, you know?
I mean, what I think is really fun, right, is that you have so many different, you know, play styles within the setting in and of itself. Like you could be the rich merchant who is going to the World's Fair and trying to make all these espionage deals. You could be an like part of an expedition, like a blue collar, you know, like type person. You could be in a mage college or an art college, and that could be an entire game and a campaign in of itself. Like this, this setting is rife for hooks and different play styles. It's so exciting. All right, so I'm really excited, and we have to roll a twist before we get on out of here. So let's see what the twist for our let's see what our twist is for the Renaissance setting that we've got going on here. Let's roll the die. You know, I think that this twist is actually kind of appropriate because it's very interesting. It's very, the setting itself is very interesting. So the twist itself is there's no twist. We just get to continue on talking about this setting because it's so damn exciting. And remember that if you want us to build your world, talk about your setting, you can always go to our website, worldbuildwithus.com. You can submit your own prompt and we will build your world, much like we're doing right now. It's very exciting. Of course, if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so by going to Twitter and following @Let'sWorldBuild, where we occasionally tweet out some funny things or interesting things. If you want to come and join our Discord, or if you're feeling particularly generous and want to give us money over on Patreon, a link for both of those are in the description of this very episode. That'll do it for this episode of World Build with Us. Remember that we love you very much, and we're going to get through this together. Until next week.